The day that Ballaspree was running in a Group 3 race, we were playing Brisbane at Marvel Stadium. I can remember sitting in the coach's box and they put this race on the big screen. So I'm sitting next to Kevin. He's making out that he's not watching the screen, right? But he's got another screen under the table that he's actually watching because Ballaspree's starting to rock and roll in the last sort of 100 or 200 metres in this race. And he's starting to kick, I said, are you concentrating on the game? I said, the camera's on you, and he's kicking a kick. He barracked for the horse. There's no question for that minute and 10 or whatever it takes for 1,200 metres that he was watching the horse. It was the one time I've seen him distracted. It was during this game, and we actually got beat. Went up to him after. I said, listen, tell the trainer not to run a horse on a Saturday, will you, for God's sake? We can't keep going through these sort of things.
G'day sports fans and welcome to Quinny's Stablemates. Our very special guest today, Mark Harvey, a man that won 3 premierships for the Bombers, played 205 games and also did something incredible, and that's owned a Group 1 winner. We'll chat about that and much more today. Thanks for joining us, Mark.
Good to be here, Nick. Followed racing as closely as I have football. Been a big part of my life. Owned many racehorses, had a lot of fun, met a lot of characters.
I can't wait to talk about all that and more. And one of the characters that's very much like-minded is Kevin Sheedy, the man that gave you your start in footy. And no doubt you've got a lot of great racing-related stories with Sheeds.
Well, he was my only coach, and he didn't start punting until probably the age of 45. And some would say that I introduced him to the punt. And then, of course, he went on to own racehorses, and the most famous one is Ballaspree, obviously.
So how did that start? How did you get Sheeds involved with having a flutter?
Well, in those days when we trained at Windy Hill, we had a TAB right in the facility. So sometimes I would sneak in there before training. We weren't professional in those days. And I used to go out to lunch with a few guys throughout the course of the week, and they're all mad punters. A close mate of mine is Kerry Good, who played for North Melbourne, finished up playing a few games at Essendon, and we went on to racehorses together. And I think Sheeds basically met these guys in and around the TAB and then started to have a look. So I'm to blame.
You're to thank, because it really did light a flame with Sheeds, and he went on to own a horse named Ballaspree who had a great race career, but then what he did at stud was simply sensational. So have you sat down and worked out how much money you've actually won, Sheeds? I mean, winning him 3 premierships is one thing, but the amount of money you've made him.
Well, Nick, I can tell you that he hasn't parted with any of that money towards me. So, look, he that was the first horse that he ever got involved in. Now, 10%. There was 10% left in this horse. He got invited by Brian Donahue, who was the chairman of selectors, who was into his racehorses. And he asked Sheeds if he wanted to go in. There was 10% left. Sheeds did not want to part with the money. And I think you'll even find that Brian may have paid for Sheeds' share, and he's fallen into it. Therefore, as you saw, years later, he goes on to win a couple of Group 1s and goes to start. So I've estimated that he's probably made about 700,000, Nick.
Wow. And
now,
no little envelope, thanks,
no,
little something for you.
Not even a lunch. Not even a lunch. So I think that goes with a lot of senior coaches, although I finished up being a senior coach myself for a short period of time. But no, Kevin's renowned for that. Look, he was, and I guess ever since he's sort of bred horses via Ballaspree, so not with a lot of luck, though.
Not with a lot of luck, but it's a nice problem to have where you get a free serve every year and you've got 700,000 jump into the kitty. Now, we're going to talk about your illustrious footy career. We're going to talk about your coaching career, but we will bounce the ball by talking about your horse ownership. And the highlight, the dream came in 2012 with a horse called Master of Design winning the Group 1 TJ Smith Stakes.
Yeah, I think about a year or two before that, this horse was trained by the Freedman brothers, and the Sheik owned the horse. And for some reason, he kept getting shin sore. He had some lower leg issues. So he's about 4, I think, and he probably at that stage they don't think he's going anywhere. And I was asked by a guy, do you want to get involved in this horse? And he was by Redout's choice. Master of Design, and so I knew the breeding and the horses. I'd owned a number of race horses. I'm going to tell you about that. Met a lot of interesting trainers and characters. So I finished up getting involved for 5% of Master Design, and I was in West Australia at the time, and I suggested that we might want to bring him over to West Australia, and I was good friends with Adam Durant, who was the number one trainer over there in West Australia at the time. And we did, and Adam trained him up for about 3 or 4 months, and sure enough, first up, he won at, I think it was Ascot, first up, and blitzed him, and from there, Adam thought that we'd take him back to Melbourne, and we had a group horse on our hands.
And from there, he did have success. He won some races along the way, but the times he'd raced at Group 1 level, he'd been well back in the pack. In hindsight, there was genuine excuses.
Yeah, there was. When Adam took him back to Melbourne, he travelled with him at the time, and he was setting him for races like the Newmarket and Lightning. He was a sprinter. And then he actually got, when he arrived, he had got laminitis in his feet, and we nearly lost him, actually. And then Adam couldn't, then he had to have a spell for a long period of time after that. And so Adam had to come back, and then we had to change trainers then, and I think Australian Bloodstock got involved in the horse then in around that time. And he finished up getting trained by Sydney trainer David Payne. And you're right, he was in the Newmarket, Caulfield, and Craig Williams rode him, and we got stuck on the fence and we didn't get a look at things. And, we were one of those, I think we finished 9th, but we were only beaten 2.5 lengths. Probably should have nearly won the race. And then we took him down the straight a couple of weeks later, being a colt. He didn't really like it down there. So we finished up taking him to Sydney. And from there, I think he won a Group 2. And then we had him entered into the most famous race, the TJ Smith.
And you talk about the fact the Flemington Straight race, the Newmarket, it was won by Haylis. Buffering was runner-up, so it was a top edition of the race. And basically he did everything wrong, but still ran well enough to show encouraging signs that the big win could be just around the corner. But you went to that TJ Smith, and it was a hot race. You had Fox Wedge, a $2.10 favourite, and Rain Affair, a $2.70 second elect. It was billed as a match race. All the hype was about these two horses going head-to-head, and we can't wait to see which one will win. And the other horses in the field were not given much recognition.
No.
What was it like when all the focus was on those two, and you probably felt we've got a genuine smoky here?
Oh, it's funny. I can remember listening to a voicemail of the trainer at the time, which was David Payne, and he said, well, you blokes, I'm going to win a Group 1. And he's South African, so he had the accent. And anyway, leading into that race, we were 70-1, and there was only 7 horses in the field. And what's stuck in my mind was that Craig said that just give me another opportunity, and I'm sure you're going to get what you're looking for, you blokes. So, ironically, that day, which was a Saturday, the race was worth $1 million in 2012, $600,000 to the winner. I was coaching. I'd moved from Fremantle to Brisbane. We were playing Fremantle in WA. So this is happening just an hour or two before the game, and I'm now coaching with Brisbane against my old club that I was coaching, which was Fremantle. So this happened 2 hours before the game. And the gates opened, and we missed the kick a little bit. Craig sort of settles him down last. Rain Affair goes to the front. Fox Wedge is not far behind. There's a little bit of speed on, but sort of Rain Affair got his own way. Rain Affair was considered a wet tracker, but if you left him alone, you were asking for trouble. If he was in front. And about 300 out, Craig sort of made his move. We come 3 wide, and I thought, Rain Affair's had it easy. I thought, if we finish 4th, 3rd, I'm looking at the prize money to see what that is. Naturally, I'm 5%. And with about 100 to go, Craig's really starting to vigorously ride him, and we're starting to really mount a challenge now. I'm thinking, no, 3rd now, and no, 2nd. And right on the line, he's just put his head down, and one of the greatest thrills of all time, it's right up there with when you win a Group 1 race and you're part of it. It's like a grand final feeling after you've won. And I was just ecstatic. And unfortunately, I couldn't get there. I would have loved to have been there and celebrated with the other co-owners. But brilliant. And he never raced again after that. We sold him to Swettenham Stud.
Perfect time to sell on the back of that Group 1. Now, we'll put the replay of the race up so people can watch it. But Rain Affair, as you said, had his own way in front and you were charging late. It was a photo, you down the outside.
Yeah.
Did you think you'd won when they crossed the line?
Well, the callers thought that it had won, and, I've watched that many races, albeit this is a different track. I don't really know it. I did think we'd won, but I was just still screaming. I was like I was in the cheer squad at, say, Essendon, and I was just barracking the hole for the last 200, just thinking, my God, is this going to happen? This is what dreams are made of, and ultimately that's why you get involved in owning racehorses, is to win a Group 1, and I was lucky enough to do it. Yeah,
so
be part of it.
Can you compare the feeling? Because being an elite sportsman who's achieved so much like you have, you've always got say in what happens on the field. You can get out there and you can do something. You can change the outcome. You mentioned the euphoria of winning, but is there also a sense of helplessness when your horse is running because there's nothing you can do? You're like the spectator in the stands at the footy.
Yeah. And we'd been through a couple of runs where he'd been held up and couldn't get through and what have you, or the disappointment of not being able to handle the straight down at Flemington. Then all the problems we had with him along the way. But once I saw Craig bring him to the outside, was just a matter of, well, he can't get into trouble now.
Yep.
Now can he let down and run the sectionals to win the race? He had that ability, always had that ability, and the feeling was, well, where to now? I just thought, well, this is unbelievable, and I actually thought we were going to keep racing him, but as it turned out, we didn't. Probably the right thing at that stage. He was a 6-year-old, so they need to go to stud pretty quickly after that. And it's just I've got a painting of him, and it sits in my lounge room, and I look at it every night and say, "Wow, is there going to be another one?"
That's absolutely outstanding. And have you enjoyed following the progeny and the horses that have come through his bloodline?
Yeah. He's been obviously at stud now for 11 years, but he sort of didn't really fire at stud. He was a late developer, so as you know, with the breeding game, that can sometimes happen, and therefore people don't have the patience to wait for the progeny. So he sort of slipped back a fair bit in his service fees and what have you. There's still the odd horse running around now by Master Design, so I certainly do follow him.
And you've got a horse racing syndicate that you're involved with the players from the 84-85 premiership team. So it's very special that you've got that racing connection still through that.
Yeah. We've had a guy called Ian Bell who breeds a lot of horses, loves the Bombers, and about when I come back to Melbourne in about 2016, I got to meet Ian pretty much, and he said, "Oh, what about if I breed a couple of horses and I'll put you guys in the 84-85?" Because he loved those grand final teams that we played in. So I effectively managed the syndicate. We've had a number of horses that are named after either Essendon players or Bombers, or other names. Currently, we've got one called Oak Park Rebel, who's had 3 starts and won 1 and second and won 6th. And it's been a great venture for all the 84-85 blokes that played in those grand finals, including Sheets. This is the great part about racing, is that you meet a lot of good people, and not necessarily, and they all love their foot. Most of them love their footy, and vice versa. So not too dissimilar in their thought process on enjoying life and having a punt and enjoying football and racing for that matter. So it crosses over big time.
And the highs and lows. I mean, throughout your magnificent footy career, there were a lot of highs, there were some challenges, and it's like that with the horse racing. You've got to be resilient, you've got to be patient, and you've got to enjoy the success.
Well, you spoke about disappointment. I just want to go through... No, sorry, this is not disappointment, but this will give you an idea of how many horses I've part-owned.
Yes.
So these are the trainers. Now, Nick, I know you're a little bit younger than me, but one of the first horses I had was trained by a bloke called Chris Parry, right? So I don't know whether you remember. Greg Urell, I've had horses with Greg Urell. Mike Moroney and Anthony Feroce, who's the foreman. John Sadler, the late Russell Cameron. Adam Durant, Simon Miller, I've had horses with the Freedman. Lindsay Smith, Tony Gollan, Steve Richards, Simon Zara, David Payne, the Hayes boys, the Corson, both father and son, Paul Pushka recently. And initially, when I first got involved in owning horses, I was involved in the harness racing sector, and I was very close to the Peace family.
Right.
And that was my introduction into really owning racehorses, yeah.
And I think it goes to say that you can give good horses to good trainers, but at the end of the day, it's an absolute raffle. That's what we love about it. And the fact that we're here celebrating 4 or 5 winners you've had, I dare say there's a lot of horses in that lot that didn't cross the line first on race day.
Well, that's right. So you can see how many trainers I've had. And I would say that, in excess of, I don't know, probably 50 racehorses. I've got some of the names here. There are some that are still unraced as we speak. I've got one with Moroni at the moment. It's called Southern Slammer by Alabama Express. I think he's going to be a good horse. I've also got Bourbon Road with the Hayes boys, just part ownership. All this is part ownership. As I get older, the percentages are coming down, Nick. You know how it works.
100%. And it's the training bills that kill you. So my advice is to pay a bit, take a small share.
It is. But I have been lucky enough. I was involved in a horse that won the Mount Barker Cup.
Lovely.
Do you know where Mount Barker is?
South Australia?
No, West Australia.
West Australia.
And it was a horse called Martin that we bought off Chris Waller. And that was trained by Adam Durant. So, all those things matter. I've got I used to buy all the photos past the winning post, So I've got them all hidden away, and yeah.
But that's what you go in it for.
That's right.
For the photo on the wall, for the experience and the fun.
The banter. Nothing better to go down to Flemington Racecourse. I used to go in the mornings, and I'll be in there. I go down to the track, and what's those where they sit and watch the track work
in the towers.
In the towers. And the banter, the comedy, it is first rate. It's like going to stand-up comedy. I've listened to the Freemans give it a Sadler, give it a Corson, give it a Moroni, mate, vice versa, and it is just a barrel load of fun on top of they're obviously timing and watching their horses in track work. And they're unique in that way.
And no doubt when you were a player, probably a player more than a coach, the banter was so much a key of it, and the enjoyment and getting out of bed every day and going to training.
Yeah, it has to be. I'd be interested to know now in those towers. So Dennis Pagan's down there. I just wonder whether they give it to Dennis, because Dennis is a bit of a standover. He won't cop it too much. Although he's good with the lip. Dennis is good with the lip. I'd love to know what Dennis is doing down there at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know how he'd go on the banter, Pagan. I think he'd be pretty dry with it though. Now you've had so much great success there with the gallops you spoke about. Talk about the harness racing involvement. How did that start?
That started through my grandfather. I used to go and stay at his house or grandparents' house on a Saturday night. Mum and Dad would go out, and he would go and put his bets on down at the Buckley Street TAB. That's where everyone used to meet. That's another part of racing where you met unique people, and he used to go down and put his bets on. He used to watch Bill Collins and Mary Hardy on, it was called Penthouse the Show, and they would play the races of the harness racing on Saturday night. So that would run from 6:30, I think, till about 11 o'clock. Every half an hour there'd be a race at Moonee Valley, and he would go and put $2.50 each way for me, just as an interest. And that's how I sort of started watching racing, albeit harness racing. And from there, I thought that once I got to 18 and 19, I just trying to. I met the Pieces. I think it was Harry Peace and Mark Peace and Andrew Peace. I used to sell mobile phones, in those days, and I think I sold them a couple of mobile phones, and that's really how the relationship started. And from there, I got a couple of horses.
And during that period of time, harness racing was every bit as big as the gallops.
It was. Saturday night was huge. I mean, I just really can't understand why they took it away from there. It was Saturday night was a little bit like going to, right next door was the Moonee Ponds Tavern and watching a band. It was as good to go there as it was to Moonee Ponds Tavern. So it was a night out. Absolutely it was.
And it's just a shame that it's not as popular these days, but it is trending back in the right direction, which is what we want to see. Now, we'll pivot across to your footy and then we'll go back to the racing. And You're a young Bombers supporter. You grew up, and I think a lot of people forget that at the time you were a young buck, the Bombers, they were struggling. They hadn't won a flag since 1965, and you get the chance to go to your childhood club, Essendon, coached by the great Kevin Sheedy.
Yep.
What do you remember about those early doors, walking through the front gate, your first season on the back of a pretty bad grand final defeat the season before?
I was born in 1965, actually, so there is a little bit of interesting timing there. And my grandparents, once again, they should take me to the football at Windy Hills. So I barracked for Essendon as a kid, and I used to. I actually had to sit in the rafters of the grandstand because I couldn't see, and there was 20-odd thousand there at Windy Hill, and I used to go every second week and just watch my idols at that stage, which were blokes like Simon Madden and Terry Danaher, Tim Watson, Paul Vanderhaar. Paul Vanderhaar was my idol until I met him, and then I had to sort of go different ways with Paul Vanderhaar. So, and then by the age of, in 1982, I got invited to train with and play with the under-19s at Essendon because I played for Keilor Footy Club, and that was in their zone. So you had to, wherever you lived, you had to play for that club, and that was Essendon. So from 82, I finished up moving through under-19s, reserves, 83, and then 84 I played in that famous grand final, which you were talking about. 83, with Hawthorn had wiped us off the park in that grand final. I was sitting in the grandstand. So this was redemption, and Essendon at this stage had 19 years and previous, and they had won a grand final. And in those days, it was only 12 suburbia clubs in the competition. So and some of our older players are getting beyond them. So there was a lot of urgency for us to win that famous 84 grand final, which we didn't look like we were going to win. Third quarter, we were 27 points down. Sheeds made a few moves, and we got some momentum, and we finished up overrunning the Hawks, and we won that grand final. In my first year, I think Mark Thompson had. Probably he was his second year. Paul Salmon had missed it because he'd done his knee, unfortunately. But, we were playing with all the old blokes, and the history was made.
So 1983, you were at the game as a supporter.
No, I was supposed to play our seconds played that day, and I cut my hand at home, and I couldn't play. So that was the reason I didn't play in our reserves. So that was unfortunate, but that probably was the catalyst for me training hard 83, 84 to get in the team. Yeah.
So 83, you're on the cusp of playing for the Bombers, a team that you grew up loving, a team that had had a lot of heartbreak along the way. It's a different process to now where you're drafted and bang, you're thrown into the mix, but you were sort of blooded with the years going into this that you would join the club. So what was it like going in at the start of 84 when you would go on to establish yourself as a key player in the first team, but as still a very young man playing alongside your idols?
Yeah, well, I didn't get a game until round 4. I was sort of, and I at that stage I was, look, I used to pride myself on aggression. Maybe a lot of people would say courage, but that's their judgment. That's not mine. And that was the reason why I actually got an opportunity. And so you have to always felt, Sheeds would always make you feel like you have to impress your teammates. If you're going to hold your spot in the team, well, this is how it's to be, and they'll hold you accountable, and meaning the players will hold you accountable to it. So it wasn't about kicks and handballs. It was more about what you could do from a team-related organisation, and that might be a shepherd, a smother or an aggressive tackle in those days. And the game was quite different. We only had 1 or 2 umpires, probably one, two maybe. There was only sort of 1 or 2 matches of the day which had cameras, if you know what I mean, which was Channel 7, and then the rest were done by radio, effectively. So it was brutal. There was a lot of combat. Half the game was in intimidation, and make sure that you have good awareness so you don't get hit
when you're not expecting it.
Yeah, but that's okay. That's how it was. We played on muddy grounds, and that was another art form in itself. They all had cricket pitches, and if it rained, you had the Merry Creek soil, and you had to keep your feet and all that sort of business. So yeah, I look back in those days, and liniment. You could smell liniment. In those days, we all used to get just, it wasn't massage, it was just rub down, if you know what I mean. And we had to have our socks up, we had to have our ankles taped, and we had to use grippo. Do you know what grippo is?
On the hands to help you grip the
That
footy?
is it. Sometimes some of the jockeys might need grippo on those frames, you know. No, grippo. So we had to use all those things and then put the war paint on, Vaseline, bang, out we go. And it was the raw factor was enormous.
Now, your first 2 years, they were almost a Cinderella. 2 seasons, 2 premierships. You were a key part in both of them. Was absolutely magnificent. Unfortunately, though, what goes up must come down in footy. It's a great leveller. And you had some tough years after that, especially 1987, where you broke your leg, 3 times?
Yeah, I did. But just 86, we got back. We played in the final. Fitzroy beat us by a small margin. Mickey Conlon kicked a goal, I think, late in the game. And anyway, we got rolled. We had a few injuries throughout the course of that year. And then what happened was Mr. Edelston and Mr. Skase got involved. It was more Edelston because he was at Sydney Swans. And they started pinching players off us, offering big money, big contracts. So unfortunately, during that time, we lost a lot of players, good players too, whether they're great clubmen or you know, in and out, it didn't matter. We had the right culture, but we lost them, and money became a little bit of an issue. Even with Sheeds, Edelston was trying to get Sheeds to coach the Sydney Swans. Simon Madden, Merv Nagel finished up going. We lost Glenn Hawker to Carlton, the old John Elliott days. He grabbed him. Roger Merritt went to the Bears. Christopher Skase was private owner then, so he got hold of him. So we had all these issues. But in 87, yeah, you're right. I broke my leg. Nicky Winmar fell across my leg in a night game early, just before the start of the season. It was only a crack on the side, so I thought, and I said to the doc, how long? He said, you're going to be in a splint for sort of 4 weeks and then you should be able to play within 6 weeks. I pushed it too early, started running after 4 weeks, and anyway, I broke it again. And then I came back about 10 weeks later, and then Dipper come across it. So, that happens. I missed a whole year. So that is what it is. Unfortunately, you're not going to have these dream runs. So I'm amazed at players that finish up playing 400 games, and Pendlebury's going to do it. They're lucky that they've got through without trauma. You know?
Physically and mentally, players didn't have the support then they have now. How did you cope?
No, probably not well. It'd be fair to say that I didn't ever go through an injury period like that, 12 months. So the issue that also overwhelmed me during that time was that I put on about 7 or 8 kilos because I couldn't exercise or train. And then unfortunately I finished up getting bulimia, which is an eating disorder. So I thought that eating and bringing it back up was a way to lose weight. We didn't necessarily have dietitians in those days. So, and I kept this pretty quiet. Well, I kept it real quiet. And I finished up having it for 4 years and it was nearly the end of my career. Probably should have been because I couldn't play anywhere near to the extent that I was. Low energy, when you're sort of bringing up food every day, it's not a healthy environment. So, after the 4th year, which was 1991, I had to come out and tell Sheets and our doctor that this is getting beyond me, and I don't know what to do anymore because I didn't want to say anything because it wasn't a men's issue. So once I told them, then we went and got some help, which was dietitians and what have you, and finished up overcoming bulimia. So they're sometimes the pitfalls that happen to sportsmen and just people in life. So I've gone on to be an ambassador through the Butterfly Foundation for a number of years after that, and go and talk to people that have had these issues. So it is what it is, but effectively you waste 4 or 5 years of your football career.
And fortunately, you came out the other end of it. And fortunately, you had lots of success after this. How hard was it to transition out of the bulimia, though, after you got the help?
Once I understood eating the right food to a certain extent, calories, and then how you burn all that sort of nutrition through training, through hard work, then if you put it all like the sums together, then you work out that if I eat this, but I train hard, you're not going to put on weight. So that's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So I went to script on it. Yep.
But at the end of the day, when you're injured and you're putting on the weight,
Yeah.
and you're just naive to it, and you can see how one thing led to another.
That's right. No. Yeah, that was it. It's an unfortunate. It was an unfortunate position, and as I said, I was caught. I was stuck because I didn't want to tell anyone. So I was in denial. So that made it worse.
Well, you've done a great job helping other people in the same situation. So well done on that. And if anyone out there has problems, please reach out, because the cause is there to help people.
It is, yes, it is.
Now, you won 3 premierships, 1984, 1985 and 1993. Do you have a favourite?
Yeah, I would say it's the 84 because it was that was me as a kid. I was playing football from the age of 4 on a dirt road in Keilor Park. And we had streets with no names. We had the dunny man that would come every once a week and we'd have the horse and cart that would drop off your milk. And I was always, I'd be kicking the football, hit through trees to kick goals, or hit the lamppost, or kick over the horse and cart. So I grew up playing footy on the streets of Keilor Park, and only 13 years, how long? Yeah, 13 years later, as this 5-year-old kid, I'm emulating me, making out that I was, as a 5-year-old, maybe Tim Watson or so, and here I am playing with these guys in 84, and I'm part of it. Unfortunately, Nick, I'm not sure whether you ever done this, but I used to dye my hair blonde. So it was it was what it was. I grew up in the western suburbs. It meant a lot to my family and all the kids that I grew up, all the families that we grew up in a street like neighbours. It was called Eliza Street, and we're all very close. The families were very close, and they loved their footy. So I'd like to think that you brought them along with the whole story. So yeah, very tough.
Absolutely, should be very proud of that and everything you achieved with the Bombers. And to answer your question, I still do dye my hair, but it's to get it away from being white. But that's another story for another day.
That's all right. You got to do your eyebrows as well too.
All right, I'll take the tip and get to Rock Ebony and get that touched up with. Now, after your playing career with the Bombers, you work with the club as an assistant coach and then go over to Fremantle, where eventually you become head coach of the Dockers.
Yeah, probably by accident. Well, it was by accident. I'd gone over there initially just to move out of Essendon, just to find out what football life is like somewhere else. And I said, let's go to the hardest environment, which would be the travelling teams from West Australia. I had a couple of mates over there that I knew pretty well, and they'd organised for me to come and have an interview. Cameron Schwab was the CEO at the time. Chris Conley was the coach. They were really starting to emerge financially. They were starting to come out of the era where they were sort of in trouble with finances. And Chris and Cameron had done a wonderful job marketing the club, and they were starting to emerge as a team. And so I thought, okay, so I went over there and started as assistant coach. First year we made a prelim final, which was I was in charge of defence. Second year, not so well. Chris Conley's there for 6 years and decides in about August that he's probably had enough. His time's he's done. So that happens, and him and Cameron were quite close. And so Chris sort of stands down, and then they asked me whether I wanted to could I coach the remaining 7 games. So I didn't. I was reluctant. I didn't come over there to do that. So I thought, I'll give it a go and see what happens. The first game was at Adelaide, a travelling game. We won. I thought, okay, how easy is this? Not really. I didn't think that at all. No. Very demanding, very particularly on your family. This senior coaching, and anyway, after the 7 games, 1-4, lost 3. Cameron's. I said, Cameron. He goes. Cameron says, "Do you want to be the senior coach?" I said, "Well, you've seen what I've done. What do you think?" I said, "I'm not going to apply for the job, but if you think that I'm the right fit, I'm happy to, based on what I've done in the last 7 weeks, to have a crack at coaching and see what happens." And with that, they did a few tests, like psychological tests and all that. I'm not sure how I went with that, by the way. All that sort of stuff, and I finished up doing the job, but it was a tough job because I had to change the list. I think I changed the list in the first 2 years. So there are 2 types of coaches. Make no mistake. You're either in development mode and you'll sacrifice your coaching career, because if you go down the coaching path of, okay, we're going to get all these kids, I'm going to change the list by 60-70% in 2 years. That's what I did. A lot of coaches do. You've seen Alistair Clarkson now. He's got a young group, so it's hard to win. But you've got to create the right culture, the right strategy, have the right recruiting, get your demographics right, etc., etc. So I did that. First 2 years was difficult. Didn't win many games, but the 3rd year we're starting to evolve, and we make the finals, and we beat Hawthorn in the first final in my 3rd year. So the gradual build of the list was working, and then we got beat by Geelong in the second final. So we're on the right path. Some of the better things or decisions that we made was to go down the path. In those days, recruiting was well studied, list management, but if we were going to go real young, then through the rookie list, I said to him, we need to get semi-mature players. So that's, when we got blokes like Barlow, who, missed 4 drafts, I think, Silvani, Mzungu, and these sort of guys really that would add to the young players coming through, which were Fife, Walters, Ballantyne, Chris Mayne, even a bloke like Matt DeBoer who's finished up game. Yeah. So when I look back at the recruiting and the way we were bringing this team, we did a lot right,
And you've had a magnificent footballing career. We've loved having a chat to you today, Mark Harvey. I want to finish with 2 things. I'd like you to tell us about what you do now with the Essendon Football Club.
Yep.
And then finish by telling the time you watched a race with Kevin Sheedy.
I do an ambassador role now. I keep corporates connected, run a coaches club that just gives them an insight into football and thinking and the way things are operating. Look after the past players. As I said, that's basically my role. I've been doing that for the last 2 years. No, so not directly involved with the football department, but just
a great way to be involved with the club without the game day stresses.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And you mentioned Sheeds. Well, the day that Bella Spree was running in a Group 3 race, we were playing Brisbane at Marvel Stadium. And because there's this big euphoria of Kevin and his part ownership in Bella Spree, I can remember sitting in the coach's box and they put this race on the big screen. It was either during the first quarter or just before the first quarter of Bella Spree. So I'm sitting next to Kevin. He's making out that he's not watching the screen, right? But he's got another screen under the table that he's actually watching. And he's starting to, because Bella Spree's starting to, rock and roll in the last sort of 100 or 200 metres in this race, the Group 3 race. And he's starting to kick, I said, "Are you concentrating on the game?" He said, I said, "Mate, the camera's on you." I said, "The camera's on you." And he's kicking a kick. He barracked for the horse. There's no question for that minute and 10 or whatever it takes for 1,200 metres that he was watching the horse opposed to it was the one time I've seen him distracted. It was during this game and we actually got beat. And I actually went up to him after. I said, "Listen, I said, tell the trainer not to run a horse on a Saturday, will you, for God's sake? We can't keep going through these sort of things.
Mark, we have loved having a chat today. You have been a fantastic guest. Thank you so much for your time. And best of luck with the ponies going forward.
Now, I got Salt Lake Shake. Well, when's this go to air, by the way?
By the time it's aired, it's hopefully of one.
Okay. I'll be able to get another horse. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Mark.
Stop.